As we continue our franchise review for 2025 into the entire Final Destination franchise, we could not imagine a better guest to get on our show than the man who created the entire Final Destination franchise. It is our great pleasure today to welcome in Jeffrey Reddick, the man who came up with the idea, wrote the original script. Jeffrey, thank you so much for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you guys for having me. Yeah, it's a weird Final Destination year. It's like the 25th anniversary of the first one, the 22nd anniversary of the second one, and the new one's coming out in May. So it's just been like, um, yeah, just it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Is it wild? Because we reviewed the first film already, and I've said it very publicly. It's one of my all time favorite horror films. I saw it twice in the theater when I was younger, and we did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, it's 25 years. Like, it didn't even really occur to me until we actually did the podcast. Is it wild that it's 25 years?
Yeah, when did you say you saw it?
I saw it in the theater in 2000 when I saw it. Like, right, I saw it directly the
High
day
school,
I
right?
saw it the day it came out, and I think I saw it the very next week again.
Yeah, in high. Did you say high school?
Yes, high school.
Yeah, yeah. I was 30 when I wrote it, so I feel kind of old. No, I was 30 when it came out. Sorry.
But
But
at 25 years, it is wild to
why?
think because like it still holds up so well. Like, I think that's what, like, I rewatched. I've seen it dozens of times, but I just rewatched it to do the podcast. It still holds up so well. Like, it's just one of those iconic horror films that never gets old.
Yeah, and I have to give so much credit to James Wong and Glenn Morgan, who were because they wrote the final shooting script. Like, I wrote the original, they wrote the shooting script, but there was obviously enough of my original material that made it into the film that I got, story credit and shared screenplay credit. But they came up with the whole Rube Goldberg aspect of it, which I'm a big Nightmare on Elm Street fan, so the original way that death killed them was it kind of preyed on their survivor's guilt, and drove them crazy, and they committed suicide, which was a little dark. And I think the brilliant thing about the Rube Goldberg idea was that it made the film palpable to people outside of the horror genre. Um, because I know a lot of people that don't like horror films that love Final Destination. And so, I give all credit to James and Glenn for coming up with that Rube Goldberg, kind of MO for that. And yeah, they just did a great job, with the shooting script and with the directing. Um, and I think, again, we've been very blessed to have like a lot of great filmmakers. You know, I worked with Eric Bress and J. Mackie Gruber on the story for the sequel, which I love, and David Ellis directed that one. So we've just had so many good people, who are passionate about the franchise working on every sequel. So it's never been a cash grab. Um, in fact, I'm like, I wish they'd make more of them because, as a creator, I get paid. No, I'm kidding. I wish I had a toy. That's what I wish I had. I'm so annoyed because I grew up on all these horror franchises, and I'm like, everything I write is like, you can't have a toy, and I just want to I just want one toy before I die. Um,
There's not one Final Destination lunchbox out there.
I don't think so. I don't think no that here, take this to school, kids. It's not everybody. One of my friends is like, you could probably just sell a box with nothing in it and just say it's death. But but yeah, no, I'm really, again, I just as a horror fan, like I grew up loving the genre. I've always, been passionate about it. So just as a horror fan, I'm genuinely grateful that this film took off. It was actually a sleeper hit, the kind of like what Hard Eyes is doing now, where
Right.
most films like drop 50%, the second weekend that they open. And I worked at the studio, and when it came out, we saw that it was actually going up every day. And so they're like, oh shit, word of mouth is spreading. So word of mouth is so important, but then that shows you that it's connecting with more people than you thought it would. And just as a growing up on like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th and Evil Dead, and can't just all the films that I grew up loving. Just having a film that's part of the zeitgeist is just very, gratifying. And again, I give all thanks to not only the people that were involved in the films, but all the fans. Like, because again, if it wasn't for the fans, you know, there would just be one. There would just be one movie. So
You mentioned Glenn Morgan and James Wong writing the shooting script,
yeah.
but part of that process of writing is, especially with regards to horror, is the whiteboarding of like kills and slashes and gore and all that stuff. Were you part of any of the whiteboarding that built out how those kills worked, or was the kind of the bones of how these characters would be taken out, was that kind of transferred over to them?
Yeah, I mean, the bones of the story, when you have a story that's kind of set up with like a guy having a premonition, getting a bunch of kids off the plane, Death's coming after them, Alex finding out about Death's design that they were being killed in the order that they would have died in the crash. Like that was kind of the framework of the story, so that didn't change. But definitely with the Rube Goldberg aspect, that changed a lot of the deaths, for sure. And they did the shooting strip. Like so I wasn't really involved in that process. But I didn't care. I mean, I was only involved in that the studio kept me like in the loop, like whenever a new draft would come in, like I was part of the development team, so I would just give notes. I didn't have many notes actually on the script because I really liked what they did with it. And a lot of the character archetypes are the same. Like, of course, you're gonna have the asshole guy who's got the girlfriend, and you're gonna have the sibling who stays on the plane and not like, in my script it was a sister that got off the plane and a sister that stayed on, and they're brothers now. So some of the cosmetic things changed. But again, I think the whole Rube Goldberg thing, was the biggest change, and I think that was great. And I also like that they added on because for me, I grew up in theater, so for me, it's like everybody involved in the team should get the credit that they deserve, and they even added on the part about with desk design where if somebody intervenes, it skips you. Like, so, I had the desk design down, but they added even something extra to it that I thought was really good. And it's funny because like my friend that worked at New Line, Brett Leitner, came up with the title, like it was originally Flight 180. And we were just like, we can't make a franchise out, because Flight 182, Flight 183. And we were just we were racking our brains. And I remember my friend came into the office one day and he just flown back from somewhere. And he's like, what about Final Destination? Like, that's what they say on the plane. And that's kind of like, and I called the producer up and they're like, that's the title. So it takes a village to make a movie. And, I'm just always grateful, like, especially if things are made better. You know what I'm saying? Like if somebody expands on something that I've done, like, and they make it stronger and they make it, again, like my version it would have maybe had a Nightmare on Elm Street level success within the horror community, but it wouldn't have gone beyond the horror community like it has now. So, um, so yeah, it's an exciting process, and it was exciting to, work on the sequel. Like I knew probably 4 weeks into the release of the first one that they were going to start, a sequel. So I started working on a story for that like immediately, um, and got to do all the fun stuff I wanted to do with the sequel, like expand the mythology. I set up a bunch of teenagers you think are going to be the leads, and then I killed them all except for AJ Cook's character. And I originally was going to bring Alex and Clear back, but they couldn't get Devon back. Um, but since we never saw him die on screen, I am still very much in the camp of he is not dead. If you don't see somebody die in a horror film, they're not dead. So I think Alex, Kimberly, and Sheriff Michael Landis played the sheriff. I'm blanking on his name, but they're in my brain. They're still alive out there because we never saw them die on screen. So
I like
hopefully,
I like that theory. I like that very much.
yeah,
I know very famously this originally started, you wrote it as an X-Files episode. Now I am a devoted X-Files fan. I love X-Files.
yeah.
It's absolutely. Can I ask, like, I don't want to go too deep inside baseball, but when you originally, because I know you originally wrote the script, I read interviews where you said it was Scully's brother was on the plane, had the permit. Can I just ask, like, very bare bones, like, what was the X Files story? Because I love X Files, and when I read an interview with you saying that, I was like, man, like, I love Final Destination, but that would have been a killer X Files episode.
You can I don't know what, I forget if it was Bloody Disgusting, but the script is actually online. The only thing is I had saved it, but I didn't save the date. I didn't know the remember the date, so I just kind of put the date I thought it was. And then some people were like, "Well, this is a fake script because this didn't happen till," and I was like, "No, I just got the date off." But no, it was Scully's brother who had the premonition. And then people started dying, and obviously he became a suspect. And I wrote it to get an agent. I never submitted it to the X Files, so it was very kind of karmic that we ended up back with. Because I remember Bob Shea came in to the office one day. He's like, "What do you think about these X Files guys that we're talking to?" And I'm like, "I fucking love them. Like they've done some of my best episodes, my favorite episodes of that show." Um, but to get an agent, you want to make it scary, but also, Scully was like going to maybe drop out of it. She was going to quit now. She's like, everybody around us keeps dying or almost dying. And so, he was a suspect. And then what you find out at the end of the script is that the sheriff that's been investigating the case alongside of them, you find out that he was shot and flatlined at the same time that the plane crashed. So death kind of went into him and was like using him to like finish the job. So when they shot the sheriff at the end, you saw that kind of like in the movie, that little black shadowy thing. You see this black shadowy thing kind of float out of him. So it was like death went into somebody who died to finish the job. So yeah, I was, that I wrote that 27 years ago, so I think my writing's probably better now, but I still I do love the script. I do still have a very soft spot in my heart for that script. But yeah, one of my friends at New Line was like, "Don't send this to the X Files." He's like, "This is a great movie. This is a great movie. So you should develop this as a feature." And I'm like, thank God he told me that.
Absolutely.
We
Absolutely.
all thank him for that.
Yes, that was Mark Kaufman. I always like to give props out. So that was Mark Kaufman who did that. So
The studio, I we know that the studio had the argument of like, we can't see death, so like, how is that going to work? So we know we won that battle. Were
yeah.
there any other battles, at least in the studio or in the process of it becoming Final Destination? Were there any other battles that you managed to win where they were like, "There's no way that's going to work. We can't do that. You have to change that." Was there any other thing besides the death
No, there wasn't.
design?
No, and there's the development that went on before James and Glenn came on, and then there's what happened after they came on. So
Yes.
I know when I was working with Craig Perry, we that was our biggest fight with the studio. It was about showing death. And we fought them on this for like 8 months. And then finally they made me put an Angel of Death in the script. Like the Angel of Death wasn't killing the characters, but it was kind of like hovering in the background, like, this wicked kind of black shadowy spirit that was kind of taunting them. So we put that in there because they wouldn't buy it otherwise. So so I lost that battle at that stage, but thankfully James and Glenn came on and didn't want to show death. And so, I'm so glad that they made that choice. And there weren't any other battles, honestly. Like there were creative things, like originally the characters were going to be adults, because I molded it more after the X-Files, and then Scream came out and they're like, "Can we make them teenagers?" I'm like, "Sure." Like I'm very
Right.
development wise, as long as it's not compromising the story, like I'm very easygoing about that. So I'm like, "Sure, we can make them teenagers." Um, and yeah, I can't. There weren't the studio. I mean, they were supportive. Like once they came on board, like it got fast tracked pretty quickly. And I thank Craig Perry and Warren Zide and my friend Chris Bender, who worked with them and took the project to them, because they had a first look deal at New Line. So I'd written several scripts at New Line, and some of them had almost gotten optioned, and some of them didn't. And this one, I was like, I need to I need to get kind of a little bit of a team behind me before presenting this to New Line, because I don't just want them thinking, "Oh, this is Jeff with another idea that we might do or might not do." So, I went to some producers who had a first look deal at New Line, which I knew would make it harder for them to say no, because if they passed, we could take it to somewhere else. Um, and obviously, they wouldn't want something that was created by somebody in house to go somewhere else. So, but yeah, really, the only battle I think was showing death. You know.
And if I'm not mistaken, I think I read an interview. I think it was on Entertainment Weekly where at one point it got to the. I think one of you said one of the producers was like, "Well, we'll just take it to Miramax." It's like, no, we'll buy it.
Yeah, yeah, I left that part out. Yeah, yeah. No, we did after putting the Angel of Death in, because it's yeah, and New Line's very, New Line. I love the studio, especially when I worked there. Like, it was the most creative, like, risk taking place I've ever worked. Like, they made, like, Blade, the first black Marvel superhero movie, and people were like, "Who wants to see a black superhero?" They made House Party, they made Dumb and Dumber, they made The Mask. They would take risks on stuff that other people were like, "You guys are crazy for doing this." Um, and I don't, because I'd been there so long and had submitted other stuff to them. It's just an interesting dynamic where they're like, "Oh, this is Jeff. We've known him forever. We love him." But he's here comes another project from him. So we really developed it hand in hand with the studio. But then, yeah, it did get to the point where, like, okay, we put the friggin' Angel of Death in there. Like, if you guys pass again, we're gonna take it to Miramax. Um, and then they bought it, and then they fast tracked it.
We talked about during our Final Destination episode, and I'll credit Patrick because he brought it up, but I actually had the exact same thought. And I hope you don't take this as an insult. I hope you take it as a compliment because I know you mentioned it's a Nightmare on Elm Street. You're a big Nightmare on Elm Street fan. We were like watching this again, and I've seen it, like I said, dozens of times. I was like, you know what? I realized watching this last time, Final Destination, in a lot of ways, is a dyed in the wool slasher. There's just not a Freddy or a Jason or a Michael. Death is just but when it played out and you see obviously Todd and you see what happens to Billy Hitchcock and all the characters, obviously the great Amanda Detmer, no one will ever forget the bus scene. I was like, this feels like a slasher. And I was like, I don't know if that never clicked in my head. All the times I've seen Final Destination, was that intentional or did you notice that? Because it plays like that.
Yeah, it's funny because there's a lot of stuff that you do that's not intentional, and then you realize later that what it is. And yeah, I mean, it's pretty much, it's a slasher movie with death as the killer, you know. And it would have, yeah, whether it had been in the Nightmare on Elm Street version, it would have been like Freddy, or it would have been, with Rube Goldberg. It's, it is things around you, but death is knocking off pretty young teenagers, which is like kind of the slasher formula. So, yeah, I don't take that as an insult at all. I mean, I love slasher films. I love everything. Well, not everything.
With regard, I think we love a little bit of everything in horror. That's just how it goes, right?
Yeah.
But with regards to like intentionality, the end came up for us when we were talking about Final Destination as well, which is that Carter gets taken out, and the kind of final lesson there is that you can't escape death. And we loved it because it comes to a logical conclusion. The logical conclusion is you can't win this. You can't win this fight. Like, it will just continue on. But it made us think, like, was there an intentionality? And this can just be your opinion about it, even if it wasn't something that you wrote in the original script. But do you think there was intentionality in that ending that would lend itself to sequels perfectly? Or was it just a matter of like, no, this is the logical conclusion. The logical conclusion is you cannot escape death. So Carter's going to bite the dust, and that's where we're going to end this. But also that just conveniently lends itself to as many sequels as you can possibly drink in.
Well, it's interesting because this is where test screenings come in. So, my original intention for the script was that you can't cheat death, but you can prolong your life.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I never wanted it to be like at the end of every movie, people are going to die. Like, that's why with the second one, everybody didn't die. But the original ending that James and Glenn shot actually had Alex dying when he grabbed the cables. And since he started the loop, he kind of closed it. So then it kind of flash forwarded to sometime later, and Clear has a baby that she's named Alex, and Carter kind of comes in and is like talking to her, and they test screen that ending with the audience, and the audience felt kind of let down because I think a couple of reasons. Horror movies, you do want to go out with a bang, but some of the comments were like, well, why is this asshole still alive? And he's here now, even though he was such a dick to, like there was all this stuff. So to the studio's credit, um, they spent, I think, $1 million to reshoot the ending. And James and Glenn wrote that ending, in France, and I'm so glad they did because again, how you leave a horror movie, like that feeling that you leave off that last scene, kind of carries over into how you think about it when you leave. And I think that their ending was much more hopeful, and which is great, because again, that's even my intention was to show like you can prolong your life. So it was a much more hopeful ending, but for horror audiences, they were like, that guy's an asshole. What's he doing? Why is he alive? And and so so I'm glad that they reshot the ending because it was just nice to kill Carter.
Yeah, I was gonna say like the one thing I can agree with there is like why Carter?
Yeah.
Why Carter of all those
all
people?
those
That's
live.
funny.
Yeah, and Keir Smith's such a sweet guy too. But
Yeah.
I just thought they did a great. I just think that and again, I have to give the studio credit because it's not cheap to shoot an ending with all those elements in it, and so they spent the money on it, and yeah, it worked out. It worked out really well. Worked out really well.
That is, I mean, I said it during our podcast. It's like, I love the movie in general, but that ending made it because you do, a lot of times, even in horror movies, you kind of get the happy ending, right? And the fact that the message was you never escape death, that always stuck with me, and I love it. And it lent itself, obviously, to many sequels. Now, you already kind of mentioned it here, and I have to ask you, I've said this on the podcast, so I'm not saying anything I haven't said before. I'm kind of buddies with Devon Sawa. We became buddies through my day job. I cover mixed martial arts, and so we kind of became buddies.
Isn't he the best? I fucking love that guy.
The nicest guy. Like my girlfriend freaks out every year because he tells me happy birthday on my Facebook page, and she's always like, "Oh my god, you know Devon Sawa." You mentioned it there. I think there was like I won't say a sadness, but almost like, oh man, that he didn't get in the sequel. And I know it was a timing thing. He had other things going on. And obviously, we love Ali Larter. She did an incredible job as Clear.
Yeah, I had them both come back. Yeah.
When you talk about like is that not that there's a regret? I don't want to use the word regret, but like, is that one of the things where you're like, if there was anything you could quote unquote change, not that you would change because the second one's phenomenal, but like having Devon back as Alex, like that was the only missing piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, no, and again, that choice was not in our, that was out of my control. So, the biggest regret I have, and I hate to say this, but I just hate that they have a picture of him that said he got hit in the head by a brick, because I feel like that's kind of a fuck you to the character, and to a character that the audiences love. Because Alex, I wanted to have a movie with the final guy, and Devon did such a phenomenal job in that first movie of conveying like fear and sensitivity and anxiety and strength. Like he's just phenomenal. So, I wish we'd had, but the thing is, that's why I killed Ali Larter off, and I love Ali Larter, but I was like, well, if I bring them both back, I got to kill one of them, and I'm not going to kill off Devon. Her death definitely comes as an extra shock, I think. But I still, I am still firmly in the belief that Devon could be out there, cabined up somewhere, hiding out, and hopefully we can get him back, like at some point.
I mean, you forever changed, like with those two movies in particular, you forever changed. I said this on the podcast. I do not get on a plane now without checking the tray table. It's like instinctually. And I know you said in another interview, you probably get phone messages, photos all the time, people who drive behind logs. It's you've changed the way people look at planes and drive. Like, it's so funny. Like, I'm not kidding. I'm not afraid of flying, but I get on a plane. I always check that tray table. Do not pop off or I'm moving seats.
Yeah, and that little detail was again James and Glenn, so that they put all the little details in there. But yeah, I'm really proud of the log truck scene because that's the thing. Yeah, I don't get tired of them. People are like, "Oh, you must get sick of these." I'm like, "No, trust me." Like, writing's a tough thing, and surviving in Hollywood is not easy. So like getting reminders that because I came up with the first idea of flying home to Kentucky, and then I came up with the second opening scene when I was driving home in Kentucky. And the original opening was going to be a hotel fire. The kids were going down to Fort Lauderdale for spring break in the hotel. And Craig, to his credit as always, was like, "Wow, we need something better. We need something better." And they ended up using that opening in a comic book series that they did. But yeah, I was driving home and I got behind a log truck and I pulled into the next lane and then I pulled off the freeway and I called up Craig and I was like, "What about a log truck on a freeway?" He's like, "That's the opening." And yeah, like so I'm so I'm just so proud of that because it's like, I think that's probably in the top, I'll say 15. I don't want to sound like a dick. So it's probably in the top 15 openings of horror movies. And I give a lot of credit to director David Ellis on that because he was a stunt coordinator. So anything that we could have put on the page, like, wouldn't be as great as what he could come up with because he knew how to do stunts and he knew how to line everything up. Um, so yeah, in the script it was just like mayhem. We just said mayhem. The only thing that you know we kept in there was obviously all of it. Kimberly's friends getting killed in the van, and we just and David just went crazy with the scene, and I will watch that. That's like I'll just if I'm feeling like a little bummed or whoa, what am I suffering in this business for? And I'll sit down and I'll watch that opening scene because I love it so much.
Incredible. It's incredible.
And that log, I mean, you said log truck, and then David builds that out, right? Builds out the sequence,
The whole sequence.
but still, the idea that you built that out is something that is now ingrained in an entire
Yeah,
generation of
yeah.
moviegoers. It's no small thing.
Oh no,
Like,
no,
yes,
no,
yes, the
I love
island
it.
came together,
Yeah, I love it.
but it's like
Yeah,
I'm scared of driving behind trucks now because of that movie.
and I don't get
And
the
and
vibes. So I think I should get some kind of medal of like something, because I think maybe I've saved some lives.
I think we probably have, and it does make me think too. Between these two movies, do you consider yourself a paranoid or neurotic person? Because I think to myself, I go, the details in these movies are certainly that of somebody who is.
I'm not. It's so funny. My mom calls me a fretter. Like I worry a lot, but I worry about like if friends are in trouble or if shit's going on in the world, things that I don't worry so
Yes.
much about myself. Um,
Hmm.
so and again with the first film, like, all the details that James and Glenn put in there, like I know um I think it was James, it might have been Glenn who, heard the John Denver song playing when he was, at the airport. He's like, "Oh, he does." So they put a lot of those like little kind of fine touches in there. Um, and you can see that that kind of carries over into every movie now. Like there's some reference to like 180s and there,
Hmm.
so the second time around I did it because the template had kind of changed. So for my story, I did put some of that stuff in there, but Eric Bress and J. Mackie Gruber wrote the script for that one. And they took it more in a comedic vein. Not comedic's not the right, more of a fun vein because
Hmm.
while the story's kind of what I wrote, like I was kind of following the tone of the first film, so it still had splattery deaths in it, but the tone was more serious. And I love that Eric and Jay like the second one's my favorite. I'm not gonna lie, it's just because except for Devon not being in it, um, because it's just so fun, you know. Um, and the first one is fun too, but it's more serious. It's more existentially thinking about life and death, which is great. as well. But the second one, I just there so many of the scenes are so much fun. And like when Kat comes in covered in blood after the elevator scene, is like, can we go see? Like those bits are I just and you know, and I've got to know the cast of that movie too. I've gotten to know a lot of the cast of the films, and I just you know I met Tony Todd, who was an icon of mine, like and got to work with him on that and another film, and he's I'm so glad we were able to get him back for the sixth movie before he passed. So I've got to meet so many icons, and growing up, I had a fucking huge crush on Devon. I mean, I was younger, so I could say that. I don't sound like a pervert, but he was also such a good actor too. And then I remember Craig Perry had and Warren Zide had worked on American Pie, so they were like, "You got to hire this kid, Sean Michael Scott. He's gonna blow up." So we got Stifler in there, and Keir Smith, played a gay character on Dawson's Creek. So I always, just being gay, like I was like, oh, he's, so brave because this was back, in the days where, playing a gay character was brave. You could be, and Amanda Dentmore, like the whole cast of the first one and the second one. I think we've just had a great cast too. Like I was a huge fan. I'm rambling. I'm sorry. I had a lot of caffeine.
That's totally fine. Totally
I
fine.
was I was a huge fan of AJ Cook's before Final Destination 2. I'd seen her, and I'm blanking on the movies, but there were a couple of really indie films that I saw her in. And she's one of those actresses where I saw her and I'm like, that she's a star. Like that girl has it. So when we got her for Final Destination, I'm like, holy shit. Like I love her. And now I watch Criminal Minds all the time because she's in it. Um, so yeah, we've had so many wonderful people, like I said, involved in front of and behind the cameras on all the films, and they all come at it with love, especially this last film, like um 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 Adam Stein and Zach Lipinski and um Sheila Taylor. Oh fuck me, I'm always got two names, and I always Sheila and Guy, they wrote the Scream movies, like they're the screenwriters. James Wan, not James Wan, Jay, I'm bad with names right now. The guy who wrote the Spider-Man movies, John
Oh
Watt.
yeah.
John
Oh,
Watt
John
wrote,
Watt. John Watt. Yeah.
John Watt wrote the story for the new one, and Guy and Sheila wrote the script, and then Adam and Zach, like when they did their pitch for the movie. Like it's kind of legendary right now, but they pre-recorded parts of it, so they're pitching the movie, and then behind them, like weird shit starts happening, and they're kind of like whatever, and then it ends with like the ceiling fan falling down and decapitating one of them in their pitch to the studio. So I remember Craig called me like right after, and he's like, "We found the guys. Like these guys like get the flow of the movie, and they're such huge fans, and they're such nice people too." So they really everybody's kind of really put their heart and soul in this last one as well. I'm very
I,
excited.
I, I, I absolutely. I want to talk about the new one to say, but you mentioned something there, and I'm glad you said it because I would have felt bad saying this otherwise. But there is a contingency out there where you're a horror fan, so sequels are part of the business, and part of you remember the line in Scream 2 where he says, sequels suck. Like that's just like a tradition. Like sequels are never as good. But me personally, I am also a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan, and I am one of those guys who say I like Dream Warriors slightly better than the original. I love the original, don't get me wrong, but Dream Warriors is like that's my thing. I love Dream Warriors. There is a lot of contingency of people who say they love Final Destination 2 more than the original. Not that they don't love the original. To have those two films, though, even just to have them equal, where people loved them in that way, I know you don't sit around patting yourself on the back or anything, but it is an amazing feat in horror to have a sequel that in a lot of ways people say outdoes the original. And that rarely happens. It doesn't happen that often.
Yeah, no, no, it's funny because when I'm in the when you it's weird being a creative type because I started working at New Line when I was 19, and I stayed there after the first movie came out, and then I sold the story for the second movie, and I'm still working at New Line. I'm still sitting behind a desk going, well, I think I could just write movies in the evenings. And they were like, Jeffrey, we love you, but dude, you've been here like 11 years. and you're a writer now, so you need to leave the nest and go out and be a big boy writer. Um, so, I've always just looked at it's just weird because I grew up in Kentucky, very humble beginnings. My mom always taught me like nobody's any better or any worse than anybody else. I mean, some people obviously are worse, but not just in general. You know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, a murderer is worse than me. But, so it's hard for me to it took me a long time to really let it sink in, like because a lot of the people I'm dealing with now grew up on Final Destination. So it's cool to like go into a meeting where they're like, "Oh my God, we love Final Destination." I'm like, "Good, make my new movie." But um, it's something that I'm genuinely proud of. But it's never like patting myself on the back kind of, thing. That just feels weird to me. Um, but it is cool because I've said this before and I mean it. Like if I were to die tomorrow, at least I know something that I started is part of the public zeitgeist and will probably be mentioned, in the horror top 20 horror lists, hopefully. um Long after I pass. So that the little 14-year-old in me watching horror movies, knowing I was wanting to do this someday, like, that kid's very happy. And so that's all,
Well, I mean,
that's all.
to that point, you talk about the new and like, and we'll let you go on this. Obviously, listen, you've had a career bigger than just Final Destination. You've made other great movies. Obviously, Don't Look Back, The Final Wish. I've seen a lot of your work, so you've done things beyond Final Destination. But when the new one got announced, there was like a genuine excitement in the horror community because I didn't realize it'd been 14 years. I was like,
I
14
know.
years,
Yes, I
and
know.
I saw the trailer and it was like I was back in that theater in 2000 watching the first one, my jaw on the floor when that plane exploded. And I'm just curious, like, again, you've created something that has entered the zeitgeist of pop culture, but also in the horror community. Are you excited to see what when Blood? Because like I'm like of all the films, like there's two films I'm most excited about this year. One is Clown in the Cornfield, which is a book I love. That's coming out in May, and the other one is Final Destination: Bloodlines. That's also coming out in May. Because I love this series. I just love this franchise.
No, I mean, I've seen enough of it. I don't want to. I don't want to see it till it's like they're still working on the sound mix, so I don't want to see the film until it's done. But and I'm not just like hawking this. Like I can tell you that everybody that worked on this was so passionate about it and realized, and again, Craig Perry, the producer, I can't praise him enough because he's been like such a good guardian of the franchise. And we've been telling the studio for 14 years, like, the fans are wanting another one. They want another one, and there's still more stories that we can tell without just regurgitating, like sequels. Um, and this one, I think, it's really good. Like the teaser was amazing. It was funny. I went to see Hard Eyes because I heard I wanted to see Hard Eyes anyway. It's a great fucking movie. If you haven't seen it, you should go see it. But I was hoping that they were going to show the teaser before the movie, and I was going into the movie theater and I bumped into Adam Stein, one of the directors, coming out of Companion, and he's like, "Oh, I was hoping they would show the trailer before Companion, but they didn't." Um, and he's just like he's so excited to get the movie out there as well. Like yeah, it's going to be it's on a reboot. It's in the same universe, but it's just again, it's not just like a lot of sequels where it's just like we're just rehashing the first movie. It does some interesting things. Um, it's a we didn't know it at the time, but I think it's a very fitting tribute to Tony. And yeah, I mean everybody that worked on it I've talked to and I've seen some of the footage looks phenomenal. I mean, as you can tell from the teaser, like it's just got a really good got a really rich look to it. It's not just like a cheap like let's just dash another Final Destination off. So they actually moved. They were gonna have another big movie come out in this year, and Final Destination or New Line actually pushed that movie to next year to put Final Destination in May. It's kind of in the middle of the summer blockbuster season, so they're going to start really marketing the hell out of it pretty soon. And that's how much faith they have in the movie, and I think it's going to be really worth the wait for everybody who's been so patient.
Well, these are theater going experience movies. We always champion the theater experience, and Final Destination movies are, you have to be there. The theater is the way to see these movies, and we're excited.
It's the home. It's in IMAX. Okay, I'll shut up after that part. I was gonna blog more, but I gotta be careful what I say. But it's in IMAX too, so it'll be
even bigger.
Even bigger. Death is gonna be so in your face.
I can't wait. Well, Jeffrey, we can't say thank you enough for doing this. As you can tell, we are massive fans of this franchise, and I just it was a shot of wing and a prayer. I was like, I'll shoot him a message. Maybe he'll want to do this with us because we are just huge fans. And again, this is a testament to the work you put in. This franchise is still going. It's still going strong, and I cannot wait for May for the new one. But thank you so much for taking some time for us. We really do appreciate it. You can't wait to see what you do next, and we are obviously excited for Final Destination Bloodlines in May. And you ever need anything, you ever have anything you want to promote, anything you got going on, please reach out. We'd love to have you on again.
Yeah, I'd love that. And if you want to, I hate to sound like that guy, but you can always follow me on social media, Jeffrey A. Reddick. On Instagram and Twitter. I'm going to keep calling it Twitter. Fuck Elon Musk.
Hell yeah.
Because not only do I talk about new stuff I have going on, but I'm also very big on like promoting like other people's films, like other horror people's films, friends of mine, or even stuff that I find, just because we've got such a wonderful community, and I think we just got to support each other and each other's work. And so, yeah, you can follow me on that. And I have an OnlyFans. I'm kidding. I was gonna say it would be funny if I did OnlyFans and it's just me typing. Like
it'll sell.
There's probably some weirdos out there that like the clicky sound that would probably do it, but
you're not wrong.
There's no doubt.
You're not wrong at all.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. Well, again, Jeffrey, thank you so much for doing this. And like I said, we would love to have you back on again in the future. So thank you again, and we will definitely reach out again.
I've got some stuff brewing, so I'll be happy to come back.
Can't wait. Thank you so much again.
Have a great day, guys.